Here's an experiment for you. Take passionate experts in human resource technology. Invite cross-industry experts from inside and outside HR. Mix in what's happening in people analytics today. Give them the technology to connect. Hit record. Pour their discussions into a beaker. Mix thoroughly. And voila, you get the HR Data Labs podcast, where we explore the impact of data and analytics to your business. We may get passionate and even irreverent, but count on each episode challenging and enhancing your understanding of the way people data can be used to solve real-world problems. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky.
Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky. Like always, we try and find you people who are fascinating, fun, and just brilliant. And today is a phenomenal example of that kind of person. We have with us Schon Parris from ADP. Schon, how are you?
David, I'm doing fine, and I don't think I've ever had such a kind introduction. From the bottom of my heart, thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate it from the bottom of your heart. So, Schon, why don't you explain to people who you are and what you do at ADP?
I would be happy to do so. I have been at ADP for a very long time now. I can't even believe it. It's been 23 years.
Wow.
I've done a lot of different things, worked directly with clients. I've worked with our sales force. But my most recent assignment, last 3 years, I have been focused on the data that we have here at ADP, specifically helping our clients use data, their own data, as well as all of the data we have here at ADP, really just to make better decisions.
And for those of you who are not familiar with ADP, ADP has over 1 million clients and about 40 million employee records in that data set you were talking about.
It's true. It's true. And David, what's special about that data is that unlike many other sources of benchmarking data, this data comes from the aggregated transactions of our clients. So every month, it takes us about 3 weeks to aggregate payroll transactions, HR transactions, take it through a data normalization process, certainly anonymize that data, but then we make it available for our data customers to benchmark themselves against, really to get a sense of what's going on in the market.
And what's brilliant about it, if I can pump it up a little bit, is it's not just about compensation benchmarking. It's also about benchmarking the types of metrics that make the ADP Data Cloud and ADP's technology special. Like, for example, turnover or recruiting metrics or payroll metrics. There's a lot of things you can learn about how you operate as a business by looking at those things. Right, Schon?
Well, thanks, Felita. That's absolutely true. People do think of us as certainly a payroll company. We are much more than that. We provide services across a whole host of disciplines, whether it's time management, recruiting, benefits administration, yes, payroll, talent, et cetera, et cetera. To the greatest extent possible, we do collect all of that data and make as much of it available as we can. So, just another example I think that would surprise your listeners is that we also have access to demographic data. So we could get a good sense for what the gender or race or ethnic makeup or what tenure looks like for workers in a certain geography or even a certain industry. As companies go about their DE&I strategies, it's always helpful to understand what the market looks like in which they operate. So you get a good benchmark of, do they represent those that they serve, those that they employ?
And so we're going to get into that a little bit and how that drives business strategies and making decisions. But first, what is one fun thing that no one knows about Schon Parris?
Well, your listeners probably don't know anything about me at all. So
well, they do. They just got introduced to you. So what's the one fun thing, though?
The one fun thing, I am a very proud member of North Georgia's premier cover band, a collection of dads that are in their 50s, just like myself, they get together, play rock and roll music for anybody that'll listen. We just had a great event this past Wednesday at Dahloneg's 50-something Gold Rush Festival, where we played for a collection of people that were just like ourselves.
Of course. Because we can appreciate that kind of music.
Only we can. I agree.
That sounds awesome. I'm actually a bass player too, but I'm trying to learn piano now. So chopsticks is about to happen.
Most people start with piano and switch over to bass because it's a much more awesome instrument.
Awesome, I agree. Complex, both are relatively complex, and people don't appreciate that as part of it. They go like, well, it only has 4 strings. Yeah, well, it's complex.
Understood.
That being said, now that we know about our friend Schon Parris, now we're all friends with Schon Parris, let's dive into our topic. Today, Schon, we're going to be talking about how does HR take a data-driven approach to making decisions and where to get started. So, Schon, our first question is, what gets in the way of HR actually using data successfully?
Welcome to the Hire Her podcast, where women in talent call all the shots. We know, another recruiting podcast, just what the industry needs. Okay, but hear us out. You ever spend hours sourcing that perfect candidate, but they end up ghosting you harder than your Hinge date? Or finally, you get that hiring manager feedback, only for them to, of course, say, can we see more candidates? Lame, right? But let's talk about what's really lame in the industry. How is it that 65% of recruiters are brilliant women, yet most of the decision makers look like a convention for middle-aged dudes named Brad?
That's where we come in. Hire Her isn't just another podcast about hiring trends you already heard like 50 times this week. We're here to elevate women in talent, share their career journeys, and make sure they take the lead. Because let's face it, if recruiting is the backbone of every company, why are we still fighting for a seat at the table? So whether you're a recruiter, a talent leader, or just someone trying to swim through the sausage fest of TA leadership, we got you, girl. Welcome to Hire Her, the recruiting podcast where women's voices aren't just heard, but they're leading the conversation.
So subscribe now, because middle management Brad sure as hell isn't going to do it for you.
That's a great question. We have tens of thousands of organizations here at ADB that are successfully using data to guide decision making, have just begun using data to make good decisions, and are not using it at all, but trying. And what I can share with you, working through a number of those, working with a number of our clients, is that the reasons are across the board. And if I could name one thing, like we don't have buy-in from leadership to transform into a data-driven organization, I would say that, but that's not it. We hear things like we don't have trust in the data that's being pulled or accessed, or we do, but our senior leaders don't trust the data, or we are light on technical resources and getting access to the data that we need to put them into visualizations that make sense for us, to provide context around the answers that we're looking to understand to a greater degree. Would be a common reason that we see. We hear, I just don't have the time to get started. And, to be honest with you, that may be one of the most common obstacles to get the clients we work with started on that data journey. At the end of the day, I tell you what, at the beginning of the day, somebody has got to take it upon themselves to make this important, to sit down and say, I am going to get our data ready to be used. I'm going to take the time to build the tools, and I'm going to be an advocate at this organization to help transform us into a data-driven organization. Unless you have at least one person that is going to dive in and do the work, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to sit on the shelf on you. So you got to start certainly with an advocate. And then some of those other things can come into play. But if you have a serious advocate that is willing to do that, willing to roll up their sleeves, willing to dive in, then those other things can be overcome.
In the past, when I've done what you're talking about, one of the things I found is that the people that I had been dealing with weren't exactly the owners of that process. So do you have to do any work actually to find the right people to talk to in order for them to understand the value of those types of insights that are available to them?
Well, for sure. One of the things that we see is we can get C-suite very excited about the data that we can produce and publish, and the way that we're able to show trends across the entire enterprise and tell stories about how that enterprise relates to the markets in which they operate. But then when it comes time to deploy, to implement, to begin using, we know the C-suite's not going to be the one to actually do it. It's going to fall typically to someone within a human resources capacity, whether it's a manager or a generalist or a VP of HR. That's where it's ultimately going to end up, at least to the extent that analytics are supporting human capital management type conversations. I would say it's more about the willingness of the individual. It's not even willingness. It's something more, I would say, almost passionate. The passion that the individual has to head in this direction is going to generate success more than just assigning it to someone who feels like it's yet another task they're going to have to get through. Because it takes a lot of work. There's no way around that. It takes work. It takes focus. And if you've got passion to do it, it's going to carry you through.
But you need to have the acumen then. If you're having that person who's assigned to it, they have to have the acumen to understand not only the background of the data, but also the statistics they're looking at and the complexities of how do I make sure it's telling the right story in order to be able to hand it to managers and engage them in a way in which it's not just an HR dashboard being shoved in their face again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. We've done a lot to make our tools as easy to understand as possible. What I mean by that is, we've gone to a large extent to deliver data within a narrative, within a context. So instead of staring at, a number 12.5, if you don't have a high degree of acumen, it may take some work to understand the context of what that particular metric means to you. So where possible, we serve that up within a narrative, and we might say something like, your overtime has increased by 12.5% over the last quarter. So that's part of it is delivering these visualizations, like I say, with context in them. That's going to help a practitioner, somebody that doesn't have perhaps a data scientist degree under their belt. But also, we certainly bring resources to bear, and that's very much needed. I think there's a high degree of anxiety, especially with those that are going through this for the first time, of understanding the kind of effort it's going to take to get your data in the appropriate shape that it needs to be in order to drive analytics and ultimately decision making for an organization. So we do find ourselves needing to jump in and help in those areas.
And once they get started, then hopefully that person can take it from there.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe. This podcast is made possible by Salary.com. Now, back to the show.
So tell me about the success stories you have of those clients who are able to get access to the data, who can understand the data, and then take it from there. What are the commonalities with those clients?
So one of the things that I've seen work well with our clients is to start small. When they're getting going on a data journey, really for the first time, is to pick a single topic, something like turnover. A lot of organizations are focused on keeping turnover as low as possible. And so start off by making a hypothesis. Where's turnover coming from? Is it coming from a certain manager? Is it coming from a certain department?
Right.
And then think to yourself, what kind of data do I need to confirm the hypothesis that I've made? And you start to pull that data, and you may find out that your hypothesis is not correct. And that's okay. That's just as valuable as proving that what you thought was true is true, because it's going to help you know where to look, right? And so turnover is, I wouldn't say that that's an easy problem to solve, but it's easier than you think to understand what's driving it. At the end of the day, turnover is coming from a particular job type, particular location, maybe a particular manager. There are going to be some themes around turnover that, as you start to pull data to support your hypothesis, are going to come very clear to you. And that's really going to get you started on making an impact on something that is very, very difficult for organizations to control. But once you know where it's coming from, what's driving it, you're going to hopefully be able to move the meter at that point.
Yeah, but Sean, the other part about that is that it's not just about the data that you have. It's also about the data that you need to acquire that becomes contextual for making that decision whether to accept or reject the hypothesis, right? So you could take all the data that you have in the system, whether it's turnover rate data, whether it's termination reason data, and as you said, what we'll call the x-axis for that, which is by manager, by function, by job, whatever. But we can also then go and talk to people. We can talk to the HR generalists, or we can talk to managers directly and say, what do you think is causing these things? I have a bunch of hypotheses about it, but I want to hear from you. So you're collecting all that anecdotal data to help the online versus offline, real strength of your argument. That's not scalable for gigantic companies unless you start driving other forms of data gathering like surveys and whatnot. Have you seen companies do that, or is it more where they're using mostly the online data to drive their hypotheses and their conclusions?
Well, I'd actually like to play off something you just mentioned. Was you said that that's not scalable for larger organizations. I agree, but here's a way that it could work. You could actually allow the data to lead you to the proper department or place or people in a large organization that you could then talk to. And I'll just give you a really, really quick example. We had a client that was trying to solve this very problem with turnover, for example. And what they did was they pulled together some data that assessed like what does our turnover rate look like by manager and position and department and so forth. What they found was there was an individual manager that appeared to be driving more termination into the organization than any other. So before conducting any survey, the thought in the HR department was like, well, gosh, what's wrong with this guy driving all these people out of the door?
Right.
So here's a situation where the data provided the channel to focus on. And so when they picked up the phone and they talked to this particular manager, what they found was there was a company that had just opened up across the street that was poaching all the talent. So It wasn't the manager. The data suggested it might be the manager, but what the data did was actually provide the pathway to understanding what the real problem was. So that would be a way that even a larger organization could take the data and really begin that sort of investigative process. But yeah, it was coming from outside of the organization.
Well, and that call that was made to the manager to say, what are you doing to your people? They had to call him back and say, sorry, we found out what the problem was.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Sorry to get you all wound up, but yeah, our bad. Won't do it again. No, but actually, that does actually channel to, the best practices here, which is don't always assume just because you were saying, because the data showed that it was that manager, that it's necessarily that manager's fault. There may be some other circumstances. That's why you're trying to bring all the context necessary to make the best business decision possible.
But I mean, the data is not solving problems. The data is directing your attention. Right. It's still going to take an HR expert. It's still going to take a manager. It's still going to take people to solve the problems. The data is going to make that easier. It's going to help us know where to focus. It's going to reduce the time it takes to get from point A to point B. And to the degree that your data is good and accurate and current, it's even going to get you there faster and better.
Hey, are you listening to this and thinking to yourself, man, I wish I could talk to David about this? Well, you're in luck. We have a special offer for listeners of the HR Data Labs podcast, a free half-hour call with me about any of the topics we cover on the podcast or whatever is on your mind. Go to salary.com/HRDL consulting to schedule your free 30-minute call today. Well, that drives me to my next question, which is the robots being our overlords. How do we look forward and see that the tools around our data are going to change with regard to your favorite two-letter word, AI, artificial intelligence, and the ability for clients to adapt to that?
Well, you just came back from HR Tech, did you not?
I did.
I heard, I wasn't able to go myself, that AI was one of the primary topics that was discussed at HR Tech. What would you say?
In the same way that cloud was about 10 years ago. 5 years ago. AI was this time. Yeah, it was on everybody's booth, everybody except for ours. And it was kind of amazing that everybody was trying to tout different features or functions that AI was going to be used to solve client problems. And so much so that I think it became just noise after a while. You expected the next booth to have some kind of artificial intelligence that was built into their technology. So I think, Schon, it's transitioning from the yay, wow, cool, to oh yeah, it's got to have that. So what do you think from that perspective? What do you think clients are kind of building into their model for how AI changes the equation in being able to interpret this data?
Well, I mean, it's definitely going to be interesting to see. And, when you mention AI or machine learning, you can always, it's funny to watch the expression on the person's face that you're talking to
Sure.
try and get a sense for how they're feeling about the topic, because you see faces and brows that carry excitement or fear or
Right.
uncertainty or a desire to want to talk more about the topic, or
Right.
please don't ever say that to me again.
Yeah.
But,
Right.
I just working with our product people the way that I do, working directly with our clients the way that I do, some of the things that are already being done that leverages quote unquote AI is things like, probability models, the ability to produce a list of individuals that might be at risk for leaving an organization. In days gone by, how would you know such a thing unless you had to talk to those individual employees and, water cooler conversation, and I'm not happy here and I could make more somewhere else and I hate my manager and all of these things. But now to be able to look at data on employees and assess things like, how does their salary relate to their peers?
Right.
How does their salary relate to our competitors who are also in the area? When was the last time this individual received a promotion? What's the distance that this individual travels to get from their home to work? How much overtime is this individual working? Like, these are all things that we know can contribute to someone leaving their employer.
Right.
And the good news is, if you're building a model, these are all data points that reside within HCM technology. So you
Right.
can take a look at the data for all of your employees and at least produce a list of people whose data tells us they may potentially be at risk for leaving.
Sure.
So that is artificial intelligence producing a list of individuals that may be ready to walk. Only the individuals know if they're going to leave, but we can show you that according to their data, they may be at that point. So if you value these individuals as workers, they're great workers, they bring positive energy or what have you, then now, just like we mentioned before with the turnover thing, data's not solving a problem, but it's helping you know where to focus. So now you can
Right.
put your HR hats on again and have conversations with people about what it's going to take to keep them.
Well, it enables that HR generalist to have the strategic conversation with that manager to, as you say, focus in on those particular roles or those particular people first, where you may not have focused on them at all. They might have glossed over them because you don't know who last got a promotion when, and you don't know how long someone has a long distance to travel to get to the office. You don't know any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But to your point, the algorithm can tell you based on all those factors, all those fields you mentioned, hey, here's a list of the top 10 people you need to talk about.
The algorithm, you said it. I love the algorithm.
Well, I mean, kind of boiling it down. I'm a statistician, right? I kind of love to boil things down to it's math. And, the AI generates a probabilistic conversation that has to get started about, who are the people who might leave over the next 12 months? Well, boiling it down, that's math.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and in other ways, I mean, so that's a way that, it's being used today. I mean, as you look out, you can imagine coming in and having a conversation with an interface on your computer saying, Siri, tell me, are the salaries in our research department competitive with those of, with other organizations like us within the geography? Like
Right.
having a conversation, or what type of benefits do we need to add here in order to be, on par with our competitors?
Right.
And having data being brought forward to help address questions like that you may have as as an HR leader.
But that's an interesting concept you bring up, because if I'm having that conversation, it needs to be a conversation. right? And I need to be able to drill down into the response. And that's not something that the current AIs, especially the consumer-based AIs, have been very good at. Whereas with HR, there's multiple dimensions to most questions that get asked, where if you leave it at the high level, you're still kind of lost. You have to drill and drill and drill. Like you mentioned before about turnover. If I don't go behind the what jobs are being turned over right now, okay, well, is it a manager or a location? That's the second click, right?
Yeah.
I need to have that thought process carry from one conditional logic statement to the next in order to be able to get down to that. Do you see AIs getting to that place, or especially more modern ones?
Well, I mean, look, when I talk to you about the different types of faces that you encounter when you bring up the word AI, we have some with the furrowed brow. Or maybe that reflects a little bit of fear.
Right.
I think there's no need for someone with an HR capacity to fear with the evolution of AI stealing jobs in that capacity.
Absolutely.
Because to the point, there is a great degree of expertise that, AI is going to make it easier for you to perhaps arrive at conclusions, but those conclusions are going to be yours. AI is going to enable the serving of data to support your hypothesis, right, more efficiently, but the actions are still going to be yours to take. The way I think of it, like even in my own job, I've now got a partner with an incredibly high IQ riding shotgun with me, but I'm still going to make all the decisions, It's just giving me advice along the way. And who wouldn't benefit from having like a high IQ companion going with them around, helping them to make better decisions? My companion is not going to steal my job. It's just going to make me better at mine.
Right. Well, but I think the way you're putting it, you're giving an embodiment to something that has been thought of as a technology enabler, which I've been espousing, and especially in the conversations I've had, especially at HR Tech, was giving a personality, giving a job, giving a voice and even a name to the AI to say, we're going to employ this technology. And I mean the word employ. And, that person or that thing becomes a partner of yours in getting your job done better, not, to your point, replacing you.
Yeah.
And so the more we see it as that relative to, the car is now there, so I don't need the horse anymore. I don't see AI doing that for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The common analogy, and for those that hadn't heard it, I'll just bring it up quickly, is, when the ATM machine came out, everybody was like, well, all the bankers are going to lose their jobs now because, people don't need to go into the bank to get money anymore. And really all that happened was that the skill set for desired bankers changed from more financial acumen to more customer service acumen. You still need all the bankers, but they have a different focus and a different way to support. And I think embracing the change, right, is obviously, if you want to stick around, is what you want to focus on. But just understand that this technology is here not to replace, but to help and to assist. And it's going to, we're going to change. Technology is going to change. And to the degree that we can continue to change and complement one another, us and our technology, I think that's just going to take us to better and better places.
So don't fear the robot, is what you're saying.
It's not Terminator. There's no Arnold Schwarzenegger out there. No, I'll be back. None of that stuff.
I don't know. Maybe it'll be back.
Maybe.
Schon, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about with respect to what you've seen from your client's perspective in the world of analytics, even from a practical perspective that might help them get started?
I hate to provide advice that's stale and old, but it's been around because it works, which is keep it simple when you're getting started. And I mentioned before, if you focus on one problem that you're trying to solve, that's what I'm talking about. If you focus on a simple problem like reducing turnover, for example, you're going to learn a lot going through that process about what works, what doesn't work, what's the most efficient way to put this data together to provide insights around the problem I'm trying to solve. Once you start to get more comfortable working on one problem, then you can begin to expand that into other areas. Now, what is it going to take to, reduce overtime, right? You might expand into that area. So if you start simple, you're going to learn so much by going through that process. It's going to allow you eventually to expand over time. And that's what we've seen our most successful clients do. Start on one small business problem. And then when the comfort level is there, and I don't mean just the comfort level of the person that's going through the paces. I'm talking about the comfort level of the entire organization and the leadership, that they're comfortable as well. Then you're going to start to get buy-in, and it's going to make things easier to open that up a little bit.
Sound advice from a brilliant person solving client problems on a daily basis. Schon Parris, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast.
Sir, the pleasure is mine.
As you can see, this is the reason why I love my friend Schon. Schon, thank you very much. Take care, and please stay safe.
That was the HR Data Labs podcast. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you know anyone that might like to hear it, please send it their way. Thank you for joining us this week, and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.